Welcome, everyone, to Voices of NCAJ, the podcast for the North Carolina Advocates for Justice. I'm Amber Nimocks, your host and Director of External Affairs for NCAJ. Before we get started with our guest, I'd like to thank our Circle of Leadership members for supporting NCAJ's mission and this podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see a list of Circle of Leadership firms at the end of the podcast. To find out how your firm can join the circle, go to ncaj.com/circle. My guest today is Jacob Goad. He is the principal attorney at the law office of Jacob Goad in Durham, and he is the immediate past chair of NCAJ's Hispanic Latino Legal Issues Division. He has been nominated to serve on the NCAJ Board of Governors, and members will vote on that nomination and all the other slate of officers at annual meeting in June at convention in Wilmington. Jacob, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to just dive right in and have you tell us your career story, because it's not your average, I took a break between undergrad and law school. Tell me about your experience living and working in Peru after college and how that influenced your decision to pursue a career in the law.
Well, the story starts in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I was working as an immigration paralegal, and I got the call from the Presbyterian Church, and they had a position down in Peru for what was called an international delegations coordinator. It was essentially pairing U.S. congregations with local nonprofits in Peru to support the local nonprofits of Peru in fulfilling their mission and their goals.
You had a really powerful experience working with these communities and got a lot of attention brought to them. How did that happen?
Well, that happened when I met this. It was actually a church from up in New York City. One of the members of the church was a member of a very active congregation that was passionate about social justice issues. And she happened to be the leader of their youth group. And so their youth group wanted to come down and to shine a light on some pollution that was going on in the town of La Oroya. La Oroya is a small town that's just over the continental divide in the Andes of Peru. And when they heard about the story of La Oroya, a U.S. held corporation that was polluting down in Peru, they came down, and one of their youth group leaders actually was an executive producer at CNN. And so it was kind
Lucky.
of a fortuitous meeting.
Yeah. And you wound up being the subject, or that story, that group's involvement in the town in Peru wound up being the subject of a CNN report. Is that right?
Yes. Dr. Sanjay Gupta came down and did a report on the issues and did interviews with all the stakeholders in that environmental dispute. I spent a couple of days with Dr. Gupta going around from place to place and interviewing people, introducing him to the stakeholders, and it became the subject of a documentary that was called Planet in Peril Battle Lines.
Wow. How did that occur for you that, you had gone down there to do this work as a sort of, I guess, it was an administrative role being in, and then you wound up being like a spokesman and really spreading the word. That must have been not exactly what you were expecting, right?
No, sort of morphed into that. I thought that my role was more going to be one of connector and interpreter and, helping local congregations fulfill their desires. And then it morphed into this international role where we could do some advocacy. And so that sort of got my mind thinking more and more about advocacy in general. But it was probably because of my language ability that presented itself. I had the opportunity to sort of use my language skills and help people to understand what the issues were in a way that they had not previously understood just by reading the news or by being in the United States. Congregations, we have a filter through which we see the news, and whatever is happening, politically here, or whatever is happening, on the world stage, any kind of big issues that are going on sort of become the news of the day. So my role was to shine a light specifically of what was going on in Peru and make sure that people understood it, not only from a linguistic perspective, but from sort of a local knowledge perspective.
And you also wound up being interviewed on CBS for some coverage of the aftermath of an earthquake. Is that right?
Yes. So I was part of a nonprofit down there called Joining Hands. Joining Hands was a nonprofit that did work to combat hunger throughout South America, but in particular in Peru. And so Joining Hands asked me if I wouldn't mind responding to the earthquake that happened in Ica, Peru, at that time. And so CBS called my phone and asked me what was going on when I was down in Ica. And I was taking pictures of the devastation. It was, over a 7-point Richter scale earthquake, just structures demolished all over the place, things that I never want to see again, frankly, in my life. Just the suffering, human suffering, and death that came from it. And so CNN called me and asked if I might speak about what was happening so that the world would know, and ultimately so that aid could be brought to those places. And so I was on CBS Evening News one time when that happened.
How did the idea or the sort of decision to go to law school emerge from the experience that you had working in Peru?
At that point in my career, I had an undergrad degree from UNC. I was trying to, in my 20s, figure out how to best use my education to benefit the most amount of people that I could. And the idea of advocacy continued to be the common thread. And so when I returned from Peru, I had worked for a nonprofit organization doing housing advocacy called Greensboro Housing Coalition. And then an opportunity presented itself to me to work for a law firm. I worked for Lisa Lanier at Lanier Law Group for a while as a
Oh,
paralegal.
yeah. Okay.
And then from that, I grew close to an associate attorney there by the name of Peter Van Rooten. To be frank, we would play beer pong on Friday afternoon and talk about his cases. And I was like, well, if Peter can do it, then I'm pretty sure that I could do it. So I felt inspired to take the next step, and that's when I applied for to North Carolina Central's evening program and started my studies there.
And so after you graduated, you found yourself moving towards the workers' compensation practice area?
Yes. In fact, before I had graduated, Lanier Law Group had bestowed on me the privilege of being the workers' comp dedicated paralegal at that time. And so I
Ah,
really
okay.
enjoyed that work at that time. And it was just a continuation of what I had previously been doing as a paralegal. So, all told, I probably have been involved in workers' compensation since around 2009 or 2010, first as a paralegal.
Okay. And what about the practice do you find fulfilling?
Well, I believe that the profession of being an attorney is a noble profession to begin with, but there is something that is really, to me, that really connects with who I am about helping people who have been injured and who are unable to provide for their family, and filling that gap with honest compensation for people who are disabled as a result of their industrial injuries. That really connects with me because my family taught me to be, a hardworking person. I come from a long line of those. Thinking back about my great grandfather who came back from World War II and worked for a construction company, and then my other grandfather who was the Korean War and then came back and worked in various things, but nothing, blue collar labor primarily throughout their history in Southwest Virginia. And your everyday, people, my grandmother who worked in the cafeteria at her son's school, my other grandmother who worked in a factory making sweatshirts and things like that. So I come from blue collar people. And I think that makes a difference because when I think about my clients, I think about my family and how this would impact my family if they were one of my family members.
Yeah, that's powerful. Was there a case or a moment or a particular client that early on or at any time in your career where you knew that this is exactly what I should be doing? I know I've made the right decision to pursue workers' comp.
Yes, and I believe it happened likely in my freshman year as an attorney. I was working at the law offices of James Scott Farron under the guidance of several mentors. There's too many to name there. And they had me paired not with one attorney, but like all the attorneys because I was bilingual. And so I had the benefit of seeing different styles and, you know, selecting from those styles the one that I wanted to incorporate in my practice, which was extremely valuable. But coming back to your question, the cases that come to mind are cases that involve people who are probably first generation immigrant employees who have no longer have use of their legs or no longer have use of their brain in the way that they did before, and then seeing how the benefits that were hard fought actually made a transformative difference in the rest of their life. And being a part of that, and then feeling on the other end of the client attorney relationship the appreciation for not only the legal work that had been done by some of my more senior colleagues at that time, but also the ability to understand the work as it's happening in their own language.
Hmm. I guess your familiarity with Spanish-speaking clients is, and the issues that they are facing in particular, fuels your involvement on the Hispanic Latino legal issues division.
Yes, I think that it's partly due to the work and the issues that I'm seeing from day to day. I think also it just has to do with my background. I think that, when I got back from Peru, I got involved in advocacy on behalf of immigrants in the United States on immigration issues. I was never been involved really in immigration law other than being a paralegal, but I know that there's a big cross section of workers' compensation and immigration, personal injury and immigration. The issue of immigration cuts across so many areas of practice, and the laws relating to comprehensive immigration reform have not really come to fruition. There was a period of time where there was a Republican and Democratic senator who came together with a proposal to make real substantive comprehensive immigration change in the United States, and our leaders couldn't get it done. It was the McCain-Kennedy bill, and we as a nation could not get it done. We shot it down, and so everything since then has been sort of, in my mind, an injustice to our immigrant communities who are having to live in the shadows, who are raising families here, and who don't have access to the same resources that our working poor do, unfortunately.
How is the HLD division or HLD? How are you able to, I don't know, to try to help your fellow attorneys meet those challenges? What's the work going on there that's helping?
There's a few things. One is that we try to engage law school students at the very beginning, getting them involved and passionate about representing Spanish speaking claimants, specifically targeting young Hispanic Latino lawyers and saying, we know that you could probably go and make a gazillion dollars in corporate law, but our Hispanic communities right here, they need you in day-to-day legal issues. Would you consider a career in X, Y, other categories? The things that we need Spanish speaking attorneys in are things that we all need representation in. Things like wills and estates, property, obviously immigration law, even personal injury, workers' compensation. There's plenty of Spanish speaking attorneys out there in those fields. But when it comes right down to it, fluent Spanish speaking personal injury or Spanish speaking workers' compensation, you might have staff that are fluent, but there's a limited number of attorneys who are really using their skills in areas of what I would consider desperate need. That's my goal, is first to get young people engaged, and then secondly, essentially educate existing attorneys on what we can do to equip them to have the tools to make a difference in the Hispanic community.
So it sounds like becoming a fluent Spanish speaker has had a profound impact on your life and your career. How did that happen?
It was a circuitous route that I took to get there. It all started probably in middle school. I was in Southeast Guilford County, and we had an exchange teacher from Madrid who came and taught, and she was actually really good friends with my language arts teacher, who's now Dr. Christopher Scott. And her name was Laura. And Laura was, at that point in my life as an adolescent, the most beautiful woman that I had ever laid eyes on. And, as silly as that sounds, that was big motivation to learn Spanish back at that time.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
And from there, it sort of went on to opportunities where my minister, Dr. Keith Hoffman, invited me to go and help interpret for a dental clinic that was happening on the Amazon River in Peru when I was 16 years old. And the elders of my church thought it was a bad idea that I would go, and there was like a whole thing. And they said, we don't think that he should go. He's too young. And then Dr. Hoffman and probably some other people stood up for me and were like, we think this is a great opportunity. We think you should go. And after I went to Peru, it really changed the way that I look at the world. We're a big, big world, and the United States is a portion of that. It's an important part, and it's a place that I call home. It's a place that I love, but there's other places that I love as well. And we as a country at times in the United States are a bit myopic about how we look at culture and other cultures outside of the United States, and the weight upon which we put the way that we do things around here.
Mhm. Wow, so really having a crush on the exchange teacher really opened new doors that you couldn't have anticipated.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Do you still keep in touch with her, or did she vanish into history?
She vanished into history,
Okay.
I would love to reconnect with her someday and just see how she's doing. I heard through Dr. Scott, who I do keep in contact with, that she's doing very well and that she and her family live in Madrid and are doing extremely well. So, Dr. Scott, tell her if you see this one day that I said hello and gracias por todo.
Awesome. So you are getting ready to begin your tenure as a member of the NCAJ Board of Governors after the elections in June. How long have you been a member? How did you find the path to leadership in the organization?
Well, I have been a member of NCAJ before I became an attorney. I was started out as a paralegal member, so it's coming up on 10 years of being an attorney. So that whole time at least, and then some. Then finding my way to leadership, I think in a way, leadership finds its way to you. You have goals, you want to do the right thing, each case by each case, and you put your next best foot forward and you say, what's the next best thing that I can do in a case? And then you meet all these wonderful people when you do that. And when you meet all these wonderful people, as you say, what's the next best thing I could do in this case? Then leadership comes and it finds you.
Great. And what has being an NCAJ member meant to you personally and professionally?
Well, it means the difference of having a community outside of the walls of my own firm that is sort of like a firm to me that I don't have. I'm a small firm. We have a total of 5 of us who work in my firm, and yet I don't feel that way. I feel like I've got a wealth of resources and this large sort of machine that is always there if I need it, and who I hope that I can always be there for as long as I'm an attorney.
That's awesome. Well, we are glad that you have been an NCAJ member for so long, and I'm excited to see your tenure on the board begin. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Jacob, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and I will look forward to seeing you in Wilmington at convention.
Thank you, Amber. I look forward to seeing you there.
And if anyone listening, watching, has not signed up for Convention 2026 in Wilmington, June 24 through 27, you can go right now to ncaj.com/convention-2026. Thanks everyone for listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to this channel.